I flew by myself for the first time when I was 12 years old. It was a direct flight to Maryland, and my parents had paid for the unaccompanied minor program. So that means that they were able to help me to check in at the airport, and I had a lanyard of sorts that hung around my neck that had my documents in it and identified me as a minor flying alone. I actually felt really safe because I had attendants with me at all times, so I wouldn't get lost at the airport or anything like that. I was actually one of the first ones to board the plane, and for some reason there was an empty seat in first class, so I was able to sit in first class, and they were really nice. The flight attendant said that if I had any questions during the flight to let them know, and they would just come and check on me during the flight. When the plane landed, I had to wait until everybody got off the plane first, and then the flight attendant took me to arrivals, and then the person picking me up had their driver's license to confirm that she was an authorized person to pick me up, and that was that. Everything went really smoothly, and it was pretty simple, and honestly, it was really fun to fly alone as a kid. Here are 7 tips based on my experience that would help you to decide if this is the right thing for you and your child. The first one is going to be safety tips. This is probably the biggest concern of any family. By the time that I took my first flight as a 12-year-old, I knew how to read airport signs and how airports work and where to go for help if I needed. So you can teach them things like how to read the boarding gate numbers and letters, teach them the airport codes and how an airport works. So explain to them things like the departure, the check-in, security, boarding gate, arrivals, baggage claim, so this way they know the entire process. And this is of course an oversimplification, but if they are used to taking the school bus to school, it kind of works the same way. You have to make sure you're there at a certain time, at a certain location, and then the bus is going to pick you up. But you have to make sure this is the correct bus. So similarly with an airport now, they just have to make sure that they are at the right boarding gate, at the right time, and on the right plane. Of course, there's going to be attendants with them at all times, so they don't have to really worry about figuring out which plane to go on, which boarding gate to go to. And they also need to know what to do if they get lost or if they need help. So for example, if they have a question, they can talk to somebody in a uniform with a badge. So just like at school, they don't just go to a random stranger in the building. They know who to talk to, right? A teacher or somebody who works there. So at the airport, make sure that the person has an identification badge, maybe somebody behind a counter, and definitely not just a stranger walking around. It would be good to let them be familiar with the airline logo that they're flying with. If for some reason they got lost, they know the airline logo, so they can actually look for that same logo as they're walking down the terminal. Or they could ask somebody behind a counter and say, "Hey, I'm with this logo, can you help me?" It is highly unlikely that this would happen, but if it does, your child knows what airline they're flying on, what airport code they're looking for, so they could be in a better position to get help. Another tip is to book non-stop flights. So if at all possible, book direct flights so they don't have to get off and on the plane again. But if you can't get a direct flight and you have a layover or more than one layover, make sure you let them know what that would look like for them. For example, I flew by myself when I was 14 from the States to Malaysia, and I had a layover in Japan. At that time, the attendant kept an eye on me. She was really nice, but she said I was able to walk around the nearby stores to look around. And actually, a layover is not that bad because depending on the airline and the airport, they might have kids-only lounges for minors to hang out during layovers. Sometimes they have snacks and games and TV, and sometimes even bunk beds if it's a really long layover and if it's a really a big airport. It really depends on the flight and the airline, the airport, so you can check all that out when you're actually booking the flight. The next tip is to have a plan. So talk about different scenarios that might happen. For example, what if you start to feel sick on the plane? Or what if you start to get motion sickness? What do you do? Or what do you do if the person you're sitting next to is kind of creeping you out? This is just a side note, but it's always a good thing to teach your kid about body safety, even if nobody is traveling. So you can let them know what to do if somebody does make them feel uncomfortable on the plane. They can press the button to alert the flight attendant. And keep in mind that the flight attendants already know that this is an unaccompanied minor, but it's definitely good to let the child know, okay, this is what you do if that does happen. Some other things would be like, what if you get lost at the airport? What if the person picking you up is running late? How can they contact you during their trip? Another tip is to fly early in the day. You can have the arrival time to be early in the day when there's plenty of daytime left, because there might be a flight delay or something might happen. So at least your child would be able to have plenty of time to navigate from the airport to their accommodations. You can also use a flight tracker app, so this way you can see if the flight is delayed or the status of the flight and things like that. The last tip is to make sure that the person picking up your child is 100% going to be there. Things do happen, so it would be good to have a backup person and let the airline know that in case that person can't pick up my kid, this person is also approved to pick up my kid. So I hope this was helpful for any one of you considering doing this. And once again, from my own experience, flying alone at age 12 and then at age 14, one of the flights was a domestic flight in the States, and another one by myself was to Asia. These were two separate experiences, but they both went really well. And I really loved traveling as a kid, and I hope this was helpful.